The raven came at dusk, its wings ragged from long miles and bad weather. It was not one of theirs. Catelyn saw that at once. The wax on its leg was chipped green instead of gray, the seal pressed crookedly. It flapped twice against the stone sill before the boy caught it, muttering as it pecked at his fingers. In the solar at Riverrun, the light was going, turning the river outside to molten copper. A thin rain misted the air, ghosting the battlements and softening the banners that hung heavy from the walls. The silver trout of Tully, the dire wolf of Stark, the flayed man of Bolton among them, red and obscene. The boy bowed and held out the cylinder. "For the king, my lady," marked urgent. Robb stood with his back to the windows, hands braced on the great oak table. Maps and tokens lay scattered before him. Carved lions and wolves and stags, bits of polished riverstone, smudges of charcoal where his uncle Brynden had drawn lines of march. He looked up only when the parchment was in his hand. The leather jerkin he wore had seen rain and dust and more than a little blood. When he broke the seal, Catelyn could see how his fingers shook, though his face remained still as a winter pool. "What is it?" Edmure asked. He was pacing. He did that more these days, wearing hollows into the rugs. "If it's from the phrase, they can." "It's not from Lord Walder," Robb said. His lips moved as he read, his eyes skating line by line, slower than his father had ever read, but steady. The silence in the room thickened. Ser Brynden sat in the corner, a shadow in black and mail, sharpening his dagger with short, patient strokes. His one good eye watched Robb's face, not the blade. Catelyn waited. She had learned to find comfort in the waiting, to make a quiet keep of it inside herself. The gods knew she had little else. At last Robb lowered the letter. "A ship has come in at White Harbor," he said. His voice sounded even, but she heard the crack at the edges. "A trader out of Pentos. They bring news." "Of what?"
Edmure demanded.
"Of whom?" Brynden corrected, dry as old parchment. Robb looked at his mother. For an instant he was the boy she had sent south with his father, still learning to lace his own mail properly. The next heartbeat, the boy was gone, and in his place stood a young king. "They say dragons live again," Robb said. The word fell into the room like a dropped stone. It sank and vanished, and the ripples went out, touching everything. "Dragons," Edmure repeated. He tried to laugh, but it came out thin. "Some slaver's tale. Sailors will say anything if there's coin in it. The maester at White Harbor sends this with his own hand," Robb said. "He names the trader, the ship, the ports. He says the same tales come from 3 cities, and he's had verified word from Bravos that the red priests there have changed their prayers. They call fire by a new name." Catelyn heard herself say, "What name?" "Stormborn," Robb said. "Daenerys Stormborn, the last Targaryen." The fire in the hearth crackled, shifting. Outside, the rain thickened, drumming softly against the shutters. Brynden sheathed his dagger with a small, controlled motion. "The usurper's girl," he said. "A babe when they fled. I thought she died with her brother beyond the sea. That's what we were told." "Apparently not," Robb said. "The letter says she hatched 3 dragons on a pyre in the east. They follow her now." "Dragons have been dead for more than a century," Edmure protested. "It's sorcery and nonsense." Catelyn remembered the skulls in the Red Keep, dusty and vast, their empty sockets like caves in the stone. Ned had walked her past them once, silent, their footsteps echoing. A girl had married a dragon prince in that very city, not so long ago. That girl had been Catelyn's age then, or younger. "The Iron Throne was made by dragons," she said softly. "Steel and fire, and blood." All eyes turned to her. She straightened, feeling the weight of them. "Stories come on every ship," Edmure said. "Why should we leap at this one? We have our own war to win." "That is exactly why we should listen," Brynden said. His voice was flat, but a spark lived there now. "If dragons have returned, the game has changed." Robb's hand closed around the parchment. "The maester writes more," he said. This girl queen has freed slaves in cities far east of Pentos. She loosed chains and crucified their masters. So they say. Mercy and cruelty in the same breath, Catelyn murmured. Sounds like a Targaryen, Brynden said. Robb looked back down at the letter. She marches with an army that never breaks, he said. Unsullied, and sells words, and dragons. He raised his eyes again. She wants Westeros. She wants the Iron Throne. The Lannisters will have a new foe to fret over. Then, Edmure said, let them choke on that. They won't be the only ones, Brynden said. He pushed himself to his feet, his mail rasping softly. If she crosses, there will be war on a scale we haven't seen since Aegon stood on the field of fire. Only this time, the field will already be soaked in blood. Robb's gaze went back to the map. Catelyn watched the thoughts move behind his eyes like storms over a plain. He stood very still, as his father had when hard choices came. His hand opened and closed over the parchment. What is it, Robb? She asked. She kept her voice gentle. He looked at her. When father rode south, he went alone, he said. He took only his household guard and a few companions. He had no allies but the ones Robert gave him. When your father rode south, there were no dragons, Catelyn said. Robb's mouth flattened. He touched the wolf carved into the table, a small thing of ash wood, the grain worn smooth from his hands. The Lannisters murdered my father, he said softly. They broke guest rights, slaughtered You our men burned our lands. They hold my sisters, and every day they sit that throne. Every day they send more steel north. He breathed out, slow. I mean to bring them down, but this girl could be a storm that sweeps them away in a night. And us with them, Edmure said sharply. Not if we stand in its eye, Brynden said. If the storm breaks where we tell it. Catelyn saw where the words were leading. Her heart clenched. She is the last of her line, Robb said. She will need Westerosi lords if she is to sit that throne. She will need ships and men and a name the people here will heed. He met his mother's gaze. We could give her that, if she would give us something in return. The North, Catelyn said. Our freedom. Robb nodded. Recognition of the North as a separate kingdom. The Riverlands with us. Our borders respected. No Lannister ever to rule us again. Edmure stared at him as if he'd gone mad. You would trade one king for another, he said. One high queen for a dragon one. What of our own crown, Robb? They named you king in the north. Will you throw that away the moment a prettier crown sails up the narrow sea? Robb's jaw clenched. This is not about crowns. You say that, Edmure said. But men bled for yours. Catelyn stepped between them with her eyes. Peace, she said. All of you, this is only ink on parchment. Tales from across the sea. No dragons have darkened our skies. Not yet, Brynden said. Robb folded the letter. Uncle, he said, how long would it take to send riders to White Harbor? 3 days hard, Brynden said after a beat. He knew the roads as he knew his own skin. For if the rain keeps, and from there across the narrow sea months, up to a year if you don't know where you're going. We have maesters and merchants who might, Robb said. Lord Manderley has ships, and contacts in Bravos. We would not be sailing blind. Edmure spread his hands. You mean to send envoys to this girl? I mean to see if she is real, Robb said. If she is, we cannot pretend she does not exist. I will not wake one morning to hear dragon wings over Riverrun and know I did nothing when I might have done something. This is folly, Edmure said. Chasing ghosts while Tywin Lannister. Tywin Lannister is a man, Brynden cut in. He eats and sleeps and shits like the rest of us. Dragons are something else. And if what the letter says is true, the girl who rides them has freed a city of slaves. That's more mercy than I ever saw from a Lannister. Catelyn could see the shape of it forming. Ships from White Harbor slipping out under cover of mist, gliding east with stark banners furled. Men speaking a language she did not know, walking among cities she could not picture. A girl with silver hair standing amid fire. "Who would you send?" she asked. Robb's eyes went to Brinden at once, then to the map, then back again. "I need my uncle here," he said quietly. "He knows these rivers, and Tywin's mind. If my envoys vanish beyond the sea, I cannot lose him as well." "He's right," Brinden said gruffly. "Then who?" Catelyn pressed. Robb hesitated a heartbeat. "Someone the North trusts," he said. "Someone the East might heed. Someone who can speak with the weight of my word. But who is not me?" His fingers closed on the wolf again, hard enough that the wood creaked. "I will send Lord Wyman Manderley," he decided. "He has ships, and he's grown too fat for a warhorse. Let him wage a different war. And I'll send one of my own banner lords with him." "Karstark," Edmure suggested. Catelyn saw the shadow pass over Robb's face at the name. The Lord of Carhold had bled for him, had bled the King's blade as well. The hall where Robb had given that sentence still seemed to echo with the sound of the axe. "No," Robb said softly. "Not Karstark. They still look at me and see that." He swallowed once. "Meege Mormont," he said. "Or one of her daughters. Ollie Flint. Yora, no." His mouth twisted. "No, not him." Brinden shifted. "Send me for the first leg," he said. "I can ride to White Harbor and help them put together the rest. Once the ships are ready, they can sail without me. I'll come back along the coast." Catelyn listened to them sketch plans in the dimming light. Names of captains, sums of coin, routes through Bravos or Mere. She thought of the narrow sea, a cold gray immensity between her world and this dragon queen's. Men had drowned in it, vanished into its storms. So might any hope they pinned to it. "Robb," she said, when at last they paused, "you would bend your knee to a Targaryen?" He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw that he had already imagined it. His shoulders straightened under the weight of it. "I would not bend for myself," he said. "Not to the boy on that throne, not to any Lannister, not to Robert's brothers. The North remembers. But if this girl would set my people free, if she would send her dragons against our enemies instead of us, then I will speak with her as one sovereign to another. If we reach terms, I will go as far as I must." His jaw tightened. "And if she will not treat, if she means to claim the North as the last kings did, then I need to know that as well. Better to face a dragon with your eyes open than wait for the sky to fall without warning." He was his father's son in that moment, and something else besides, something harder, forged in war. Catelyn's prayer was silent. "Gods, guard him. Guard us all." She thought of a silver-haired child she had glimpsed once in the Red Keep. A soft, pale thing clinging to her nurse's skirts while men whispered about kings. That child, if she lived, had walked through fire. Catelyn had done the same in another way. Fire changed things. "Then we must move swiftly," Brinden said. "If the rumors have reached White Harbor, they will reach King's Landing as well. Tywin will be thinking his own thoughts. I'd wager my saddle on it." Robb folded the letter a final time. "Summon Lord Bolton, Lord Umber, Lady Mormont, and the other northern lords," he said. "They must hear this and stand by whatever choice is made. If a dragon queen comes to Westeros, I will not stand alone in facing her." He placed the parchment beside the map. The rain kept whispering against the stone, and far below, the river flowed on indifferent, wearing away the land grain by grain. That night, Catelyn lay awake listening to the water. Somewhere beyond the sea, if the tales were true, a girl was stirring embers that had lain cold for generations. Catelyn wondered if that girl lay awake as well, listening to another river, another wind, dreaming of a land where wolves roamed frozen forests and oak-armed castles looked down on green fields of war. When she slept at last, she dreamed of a sky torn open by wings. Daenerys had seen cities burn and chains fall, but the sight of the sea at night still took her breath. It spread silver and black to the horizon, a slow-breathing beast under the stars. The fires of Astapor were far behind them now. The stench of char and blood had washed from the deck with salt water. The screams of the crucified masters had faded to memory, a sound that lived only in her and the unsullied who marched behind her eyes. Drogon slept curled on the forecastle like a cat, his wings folded tight, his black scales catching starlight. Rhaegal and Viserion had warbled themselves to drowsiness near the mainmast, their tails twitching. The crew pretended not to watch them. Men who had once prided themselves on sailing any sea under any flag now walked softly, their voices low, their eyes flicking to the dragons when they thought she did not see. They had good reason. Too many of their fellows had vanished in bursts of heat and shadow when they tried to test her power or the dragon's hunger. "Khaleesi," Yora said behind her. She did not turn at once. Her hands rested on the rail, fingers damp with spray. The wind teased strands of hair from her braids, lifting them like pale threads. "What is it, my bear?" she asked. He came to stand beside her. His beard had thickened since Astapor, gone more gray than brown. He moved like a man who had learned to carry guilt as easily as a shield. "One of the Braavosi captains asks for audience," he said. "He bears messages from Westeros." Her heart gave a little kick, like a child in the womb. "From where?" she asked, careful to keep her voice steady. "The sea, the stars, the dragons." She kept her eyes on them, not on him. "From a place called White Harbor," Yora said, "on the north coast of the continent." "White Harbor," she repeated, tasting the words. Westeros was a map in her mind, a collection of names and stories and half-remembered songs. She knew King's Landing, Dragonstone, Storm's End, Winterfell from her brother's mutterings. She did not know this harbor. "Is it near King's Landing?" she asked. "Far from it," Yora said. "In the north, the last great port before the cold eats the land. I went there once long ago. The people fish for a living and curse southern kings when they think no one hears." Daenerys thought of the north as Yora had described it. Forests of pine and ice, long winter nights, a land of wolves and stories. It seemed very far from the red warmth of her memories, from the lemon trees of Bravos, from the marble and filth of Pentos. "What messages?" she asked. Yora licked his lips, his eyes flicking toward Drogon. "He would not say in front of the others," he said. "He asked to speak with you alone, as a supplicant to a queen." That word always snagged on something inside her. Queen. In the East, men had started to say it with awe or fear or both. Here on the deck, there were times it still felt like a cloak too large for her shoulders. "Bring him," she said, "on deck. The dragons will not harm him unless I ask it." Yora inclined his head and moved away, his boots thudding softly on the planks. Daenerys watched the dark shape of him go, then turned back to the sea. Far below, something pale breached and fell, a fish or a whale. The world here smelled of brine and wet wood and dragon smoke. Ahead lay Yunkai, then Meereen, and beyond them, always beyond, Westeros. Her brother's promised land. The land of their fathers. The place where everything had been taken from her before she was old enough to know what it was. Viserys had spoken of it as of a lost lover, a golden city that had spurned him but would one day beg for his return. For Daenerys, Westeros had been a story, then a goal, then a weight. She had freed Astapor because she could not bear to walk away. Could she do the same to an entire continent? Could she break the chains of men who had never seen her face? The answer had been simple when she had no dragons. Now there were 3 living furnaces asleep on her ship, and the world had begun to lean toward her as grass leans toward the sun. Yora returned with the captain in tow. He was a narrow man, the Braavosi, with skin browned by wind and salt, a streak of white in his dark beard. He wore a half-mask over his left cheek, hammered silver in the shape of a fish's head. His good eye glittered with some hard humor Daenerys did not yet know. He bowed low, not quite as low as some of the slavers had done when they pretended to yield, but lower than most free captains did on their own decks. "Your Grace," he said. His accent wrapped itself around the Westerosi words. "I bring you greeting from White Harbor, from Lord Wyman Manderly, and from the king who holds the north." Daenerys felt the breath catch in her chest. She let it out slow. "Rise, Captain," she said. "Tell me your name." "I am Caliot, son of Caliot," he said. "Master of the Lysara, my father Ca. Ride silk to Pentos in the days when your brother was still a boy." He spoke of the Targaryen prince then, with his silver hair and his talk of dragons. "I thought I would never see such hair with my own eyes." His gaze flicked over her braids, cautious and appraising. "Yet here we are." Drogon shifted, his tail flicking, one ember eye slitting open. The captain's shoulders tensed for a heartbeat. Daenerys saw it and did not smile. "You said you bring greeting from a king in the north," she said. "Last I was told, the only king in Westeros is a boy who calls himself Joffrey Baratheon. Or perhaps some of Robert's brothers still live to claim the name. How many kings does one land need?" The captain's mouth twisted. "Too many," he said. "The realm is torn like cloth pulled between quarrelsome children. There is the boy on the Iron Throne, though his blood is more lion than stag. There is Stannis of Dragonstone, who says the throne is his by law. There is Balon Greyjoy, who has crowned himself upon the Iron Islands. And there is Robb Stark, hailed as king in the north by men who have set their hearts against the south for good. For kings," Daenerys said, "and a queen you stand before." She let the words hang a moment. "Why does this northern king send to me?" Caliot reached into his cloak and drew out a cylinder of oiled leather. It bore a seal of green wax, stamped with a leaping fish and a thing like a many-towered castle. "I am no maester," he said. "I cannot read what is written. Lord Manderly's man gave me this and told me to keep it safe, and to put it only in the hands of the woman who rides with dragons. He called you Khaleesi, though he did not know the tongue it came from." Drogon lifted his head now, his nostrils flaring. He could smell the wax, the ink, the stranger's sweat. Daenerys took the cylinder. The leather was cool and slightly damp from sea air. Her fingers were steady as she broke the seal. There were 2 parchments inside, folded together. The first bore large, careful Westerosi script, ink blotted in places. The writing of a man who had learned his letters as much by will as by habit. To Daenerys Stormborn, rightful queen of Westeros, breaker of chains, from Robb Stark, king in the north and of the Trident. She read the rest more slowly. Yora shifted beside her. Impatience coiled under his skin. She did not look at him. The letter spoke of war, a father slain without justice, of sisters held in gilded cages, of rivers run red and fields burned black. It spoke of a boy who had never wanted a crown, who had been raised to guard the north and found himself forced to rule it. It spoke of oaths given and oaths broken and the price in blood. It spoke, too, of the north itself, of a land that had once had kings with ice in their veins, who had knelt only when fire came across the sea on dragon wings, of a people who still remembered that they had been a kingdom before they were ever a province. People who did not forget. Then carefully it turned to her, to tales of Astapor that had already reached White Harbor, of slaves freed and masters slain, of dragons hatching from stone, of a woman who had walked unburnt through fire. The words did not flatter. They did not beg. They laid out a simple truth. Robb Stark could not take the Iron Throne, even if he wished to, for his people would never follow him that far, nor did he care to sit it. He wanted only his own lands, his own laws, his own dead avenged. For that, he would fight until he and every wolf that followed him lay in the ground. But he saw, as she must see, that Westeros could not endure 4 kings and a queen. Sooner or later, one would rise above the rest. If that one were her, he wrote, if her dragons truly lived, then he would treat with her. He would bring the strength of the north and the riverlands against her enemies in the south. He would march beside her banners, his wolves at her dragons' heels. In return, he asked only that when the Iron Throne was hers, she release the north from any claim of fealty, that she recognize him and his descendants as kings in the north, sovereign and separate, bound to her only by treaties freely made. He ended it with a line that was neither plea nor threat. If she would accept this, he wrote, she must send word to White Harbor. If she would not, She should still know that the North would never bow its neck to a southern queen who came on dragonback with fire in her eyes. Daenerys read it twice more. The sea's breath rose cool around her. Her dragons watched her, and the men watched the dragons. "Well?" Yora asked at last, his voice low. She handed him the second parchment. This one bore a different hand, more graceful, the ink flowing like river water. It was shorter, a commentary on the first. Lord Wyman Manderley explaining his own support, his own ships and harbor, the trust he placed in this young king. Skills and assets, Yora would say. The language of war. Yora's brows knit as he read. She could almost hear his thoughts. "A northern king," she said. "A wolf who wants to help a dragon take her birthright. If I agree to set him free afterward." "It is an interesting offer," Yora said carefully. "It is more than interesting," she said. "It is the first time a Westerosi lord has written to me as a queen." She thought of Xaro Zoan Daxos and his perfumed lies, of slavers smiling as they bartered lives, of men who had promised crowns and given her cages. She thought too of the faces of the freedmen in Astapor, looking at her as if she were a god. "What would you counsel?" she asked. Yora hesitated. He was not a man given to long pauses, this bear from the north. "Westerosi lords are like cats," he said at last. "They rub against you when it suits them, then claw when your back is turned. In the end, they bow only to strength. And yet this one offer is to bow before I have set foot on his soil," she said. "He offers what he thinks you want," Yora said. "If he keeps his crown, he'll call it a bargain. If not, he'll call it treachery and try to cut your throat himself." Daenerys looked down at the letter again. The words were stark, an apt phrase and one her brother would have mocked her for. There was a heath of honesty in them, a plainness she had not heard in the East. "Do you know of him?" she asked. "Robb Stark." Yora nodded, his eyes going distant. "I knew his father," he said. "Eddard Stark, Lord of Winterfell. He was an honorable man in a country where honor gets you killed. They say he raised his sons the same way. The boy took up the sword when his father was executed in King's Landing. The North and Riverlands rose for him. He has won battles where wiser men would not have dared to fight." "He has won," she said. "Yet he writes like a man who expects to die." "All men die in war, sooner or later," Yora said. "The young see it coming faster." Drogon uncoiled, stretching his wings. The deck moved beneath her feet, swaying with the swell. "What would my brother have done if such a letter had come to him?" she asked quietly. "Viserys," Yora snorted. "He would have taken it as proof the whole world owed him fealty and sailed at once with whatever fools he could gather. Then he'd have died screaming somewhere between Pentos and King's Landing. And the boy in the north would have kept his crown and laughed at the fool across the sea." Daenerys let herself smile, a small hard thing. "And what will I do then?" she asked. "If I am not Viserys?" Yora looked at her for a long moment, his eyes shadowed. "You will do as you choose, Khaleesi," he said. "You have already done more than any Targaryen since your father. You freed a city because you could not bear its suffering. Westeros is full of such chains. But it is also full of men like the Lannisters, men who would watch it all burn before they yielded." The sea wind tugged at her cloak. The dragons shifted, nosing the air. Daenerys thought of the slaves she had freed, of the girl who had whispered thanks with every step and then vanished into the alleys, of the unsullied, faces flat as stone, waiting for her command. They had bound their lives to her. So had these sailors, for now. So had Yora. How many more would she bind, to what end? "If I sail to Westeros, I cannot do it alone," she said. "I know little of its lands, less of its peoples. I do not know which lords have hearts like chains and which have hearts like wolves." She tasted the word. "I might have marched for King's Landing once I had broken these 3 cities, taken ship with whatever armies would follow a dragon. Then I would have arrived in a land of enemies. This letter offers something else." "What?" Yora asked. "Knowledge," she said. and a man who has bled for his own cause, who knows what it is to have fathers murdered and sisters taken. If he is, as his letter suggests, we are not so different. You were born to rule, Yora said. He was not. She thought of Robb Stark, a boy with a crown he had not asked for. She thought of herself under the thatched roof in Bravos, of her brother's rages, of the day she had given herself to Khal Drogo because she had no choice, and the day she had chosen to walk into fire because there was no other way to be free. I was born to be sold, she said. Anything after that, I made for myself. She closed her fingers around the parchment. The ink crackled soft as dry leaves. Send word back, she said. Tell Lord Manderly's man that I have read his king's letter. Tell him that I will break the chains in Yunkai and Meereen, and then I will look west. Tell him that when my dragons are grown and my ships are gathered, I will come to Westeros. When I do, I will send word ahead to White Harbor. Yora frowned. You would not answer now? Accept or refuse? I cannot judge a man by ink alone, she said. Let him show his worth. Let him hold his own against the lions and the krakens and whatever else prowls his land. If he still stands when I come, then we will meet. He will look upon my dragons with his own eyes, and I will look upon him. Then I will decide if I will share my war with him. The Bravosi captain shifted, his boots scuffing. Your Grace, he said. Lord Manderly's man asked me to say one thing more if I stood before you. He said, tell her the North remembers. Tell her we have not forgotten the last time Dragonfire darkened our skies. Tell her we have not forgotten the last time it was taken away. The North remembers. The phrase pulled at some half-forgotten song in her. Viserys had cursed the North as a land of treacherous dogs who had turned on their king. Ser Willem had once said that if anyone in Westeros would have sheltered them, it might have been there. I will remember the North, she said. If the North remembers me. She turned her face into the wind then, letting it whip away whatever softness might linger in her. Ahead lay cities in chains. Beyond them lay war. Somewhere beyond that, over that long, gray, shifting road of water, a boy with a wolf banner held his torn land together with his bare hands. She wondered if he ever stood on his own walls at night, looking east, wondering if the dragon girl was real. Snow fell in lazy flakes over Winterfell's broken walls. Robb had never seen his home so. The last time he had ridden through the gates, banners had snapped in a clear sky and the air had smelled of smoke from 100 cook fires. Now char and ice and the stink of old blood lay heavy on the ruins. Theon's choice had carved this wound. Bolton's treachery had salted it. The recompense for both still lay only partly paid. The heart tree in the godswood watched him with its red eyes, its pale leaves drooping under Rost. He had knelt there that morning and again in the afternoon. The gods kept their silence. Perhaps, he thought, they had said all they would when they let the ravens from White Harbor arrive before the first true snows. Lord Wyman's reply had been careful. The Bravosi captain had gone back with Daenerys's answer. News from the east came now on longer winds. Tales of Yunkai's gates thrown open, Meereen's pyramids changing hands, slaves breaking their own chains at the command of a silver-haired queen, dragons growing, their shadows stretching further with each season. Robb stood on the shattered parapet, his cloak drawn tight, and watched his men move like ants among stone carcasses. They were rebuilding where they could, clearing the worst of the wreckage where they could not. Winterfell would stand again or be a tomb, perhaps both. The wind's shifting, Great John Umber rumbled behind him. Smells like more snow. It always smells like snow, Robb said. Har! The Great John's laughter rolled out, rich despite the cold. Spoken like a true wolf. The Riverlanders don't understand it, you know. All this white falling from the sky, and none of it gold. Robb turned. The Great John stood with a wineskin already half emptied, his beard gathering ice where his breath touched it. Age and battle had trimmed nothing from the bulk of him. Any word from Riverrun? Robb asked. Last raven came 3 days back, the Great John said. Your uncle holds still. The Lannisters sit and glower across the river like cats on the wrong side of a pond. Some fool down there says there's talk of a Tyrell host moving north. I'll believe it when I see their flowers peeping through the snow. Robb's eyes went back to the north. Beyond the broken walls, the land rolled away in waves of frozen forest and hill. Beyond that lay the long white road to the wall, and beyond that, he did not like to think too much of that. And from White Harbor? He asked. The Greyjohn's face sobered. No new word, he said. Lord Wyman sent the last when the Braavosi sailed. He'd do better with less food than Manderley's, but I'd not trust any man to stand watch but him. He's played fat and foolish for too many years to be anything but sharp as a dirk underneath. Robb nodded. He trusted Wyman Manderley. He had to. The ships had gone, carrying the letter that had felt like tearing a part of himself from his breast. What will you do when the Dragon Queen comes? The Greatjon had asked. That night they'd shared bread and salt in the winter town. If she comes. Robb had stared at the map between them, the lines of ink and greased charcoal. If she comes, we will see what kind of queen she is, he had said. If she keeps her word, we'll keep ours. If she breaks it, we'll show her what wolves do to liars. The Greatjon had laughed at that, but there had been something in his eyes like sorrow. Now, on the parapet, the sky thickened, snowflakes lending it a pale, relentless weight. You're thinking too loud, boy, the Greatjon said. I can hear the gears grinding from here. Robb huffed a breath that might have been a laugh. I'm thinking of men who died, he said, and of men who will die whatever I decide. Ah, the Greatjon said. That kind of thinking never stops once you start. Trust an old man on that. Do you think I was wrong? Robb asked abruptly. To send to her. The Greatjon squinted at him, then out over the snow. You want the truth? He asked. I don't know. None of us do. Folk will tell you they do, but they're pissing in the wind. We've never seen dragons. Our grandfathers never did. We've seen Lannisters and Freys and Greyjoys. We know what they are. This girl, she might be savior or doom or something in between. You're the king. You make your guesses, you throw your dice, you wake in the night thinking on the ones who died while you were wrong. Robb stared out at the trees until they blurred. Here's what I know, the Greatjon said. The South will not forgive you. Not in your life, not in your sons' or grandsons' lives, if you leave it as it is. The Lannisters would sooner cut off their own parts than see a wolf wear a crown. So there'll be war as sure as circles are round. If it's only men in that war, we know the shape of it. We've fought it. If there's dragons, he shrugged, a massive lifting of his shoulders, then maybe it's their fire that ends it quick, instead of us all bleeding out slow over every field from here to Dorne. Robb remembered the letter from Daenerys, the one Lord Wyman's second raven had brought after long months. It had been brief and careful, her Westerosi script neat but not yet graceful. She had thanked him for his offer. She had said she would free 3 cities and then turn her eyes west. When she did, she would send word and they would meet. There had been no promise beyond that. Yet there had been something in the hand, some tension between restraint and fury that reminded him of himself. She is burning cities now, he said. Breaking chains. At least that's what the tales say. Tales say many things, the Greatjon said. We'll see what truth the wind brings when it blows from the east. When it does, a voice called from below. You'll smell it before you see it. Robb and the Greatjon turned. Brynden Tully was climbing the steps to the parapet, snow crusting his black hair, his cloak flaring behind him like a shadow with a mind of its own. His face looked older than it had at Riverrun, the lines more deeply carved, but his eye was as sharp as ever. You have news, Robb said, his heart suddenly in his throat. I have ravens, Brynden said. More than one, all of them smelling of fish and fear. One from White Harbor, one from the Wall, and one with an odd mark on the seal I've not seen before. He held out the cylinder. The wax was a deep red, stamped with a sigil Robb recognized only from stories and the old tapestries in Winterfell's hall. A 3-headed dragon. His hands went cold, then hot. His fingers fumbled the leather. "Inside," Brynden said, "this wind cuts even my bones, and I've less meat on them than the great Jon here." "Har!" the giant lord grunted, but his eyes were watchful. In the great hall, their breath smoked in the air. The fire they had coaxed from damp logs burned sullenly in the rebuilt hearth. The stone still remembered the flames that had eaten it. Robb stood at the high table, the cylinder before him, his hand resting on the seal. "Open it," Great Jon said. Robb did. The parchment inside smelled faintly of something foreign, spice and smoke, and a sweetness he could not name. The script upon it was finer than his own, though he could see where letters had been scraped and rewritten, as if the writer had chosen her words with care. "Robb Stark, king in the north and of the Trident," it began. He read it once in silence. Then he read it again aloud, for the great Jon and Brynden and the half-dozen other lords who had gathered. Lady Mormont, lean as a spear, dour Lord Cerwyn, young Harrion Karstark with his father's face and his own hard eyes. Daenerys Stormborn wrote that she had taken Yunkai and Meereen, that she had freed those cities' slaves, not for coin or favor, but because she could not bear their bondage. That her dragons had grown, and would grow more still. That she meant yet to return to Westeros as her house had once come, but that she would not do so as a blind conqueror. She would come first to White Harbor, if the winds allowed. She would bring enough of her host to show her strength, but not so many as to empty the lands she had freed. She would ask him to meet her there. She would look upon the north with her own eyes before she pledged herself to its freedom. There was steel in the letter, and a strange humility. She did not swear to free his kingdom. She did not demand his knee. She spoke of meeting, of learning, of standing before the gods that watched the north and letting them judge her. At the end, there was a line that was not plain. "The night is long in the lands you rule," she wrote. "I have walked in dark places. If we must fight together, we should learn each other's shadows." Robb's hands shook only once, then were still. He looked up. "She comes," he said. The hall breathed in, a great beast drawing breath. "When?" Brynden asked. "The Bravosi say she'll reach White Harbor before the next moon is full," Robb said. "If the seas favor her." The letter came on a faster ship, one she sent ahead. "Moon and sea," the great Jon said. "We're ruled by mad things now." "Mad or not," Lady Mormont said. "We'll not have a Targaryen walking our shores unchallenged. We must ride." "We will," Robb said. "With a host strong enough to show our strength, and small enough to move quickly. The rest will hold the line at the neck and Riverrun." "Leaving them under whose command?" Brynden asked. "Yours, uncle," Robb said. "If you'll take it." Brendan's mouth curled. "I once thought my life would end between these rivers," he said. "Now you'd have me be their dam. So be it. I'll hold them, if I have to stand knee-deep in Lannister blood to do it." It was agreed in a few minutes, though Catelyn would later say it had been decided long before any of them knew it. The North would ride to its sea gate. The Boy King would meet the Dragon Queen, and the world, already seesawing, would tilt again. That night, Robb went to the Godswood alone. The heart tree's face glistened with fresh sap tears the color of blood. Snow lay thick on its branches. The pool beneath its roots had begun to freeze at the edges, black ice crusting its surface. Robb knelt in the snow. It soaked his breeches, numbed his knees, but he did not move. "Father," he said, though he did not know if Ned Stark's spirit lingered here or anywhere. "Lord of Winterfell, I am your son. They named me king, and I have tried to be worthy. I have failed men, and killed men, and seen boys die in my name." His breath plumed before him, a pale ghost. "I do not know if I am right to do this," he went on. "To bring a Targaryen to our shores. Your fathers fought them. Your blood stood against theirs. But the Lannisters killed you. They slew your friend, then used your justice against you. The South is rotten. I cannot cure it with spears alone." He closed his eyes. The only sound was the faint creak of branches in the cold. "If this Daenerys Stormborn is a monster," he whispered, If she means harm to the north, show me. Give me a sign. If she is something else, if she can be turned to our cause without destroying us, give me strength to see it and to act." The wind shifted. Snow stirred on the branches and fell in a soft cascade, dusting his shoulders, his hair. For a moment, he could almost believe that a hand had brushed his head. He rose with stiff legs, the cold in his bones, and went to ready his people to ride. White Harbor had never seen such a sight. They lined the harbor walls and crowded the quay. Fishermen with nets hard used by storms, merchants in damp fur cloaks, women with babes on their hips, boys craning for a better look. The Manderley men-at-arms tried to keep order, halberds crossed, but most of the small folk could only gape. The sea, usually a flat gray mirror, boiled. Waves reared like frightened horses, then crashed back in foam. Great gulls wheeled, shrieking. Above it all, cutting through the low clouds, was a sound none of them had ever heard before. A high, rolling cry that was not bird, nor beast, nor anything that belonged to this world of ice and rock. Dragons. There were 3. They came like dark comets trailing steam. The smallest were still larger than the great eagles of the mountains of the moon. The largest was as big as a house, its wings black and veined with crimson, its neck a rippling coil of strength. When it roared, the air shook. Robb had imagined them 100 times between Winterfell and White Harbor, but the first sight of them still drove the breath from his lungs. He sat astride Grey Wind at the front of his host, near the Merman's Court where Lord Wyman's men had painted their armored Merman banners bright against the snow. The North had ridden with him. Umbers and Mormonts, Glovers and Boltons and Flints, Karstarks and Serwins. Their breath steamed, their spears bristled, their eyes all turned upward now. Grey Wind shifted beneath him, a low rumble in his chest. The direwolf's fur bristled, lips peeling back from white teeth. He was no stranger to battle nor to strange beasts, but these things in the air were unlike any he had known. "Easy," Robb murmured, his hand in Grey Wind's ruff. "They're beautiful," someone breathed. Robb did not need to turn to know the voice. Arya had spoken like that once about swordplay. Sansa might have said it of a gown. This time it was Lady Mormont's youngest daughter, Lyanna, named for a dead girl, eyes bright as she watched the dragons. "Beautiful and terrible," Lady Meage Mormont said at her side, her face unreadable. The dragons wheeled once above the harbor, their shadows slicing over the water, then descended toward the largest of the ships moored near the outer mole. It was unlike any northern vessel, its hull long and low, its sails a strange pale cream. Colorful banners flew from its mast. A 3-headed dragon black on red, a rearing horse, a harpy torn from its chains. They landed on the rigging and deck with a crash that seemed to echo in Robb's bones. Wood groaned under the impact. Men scattered, some falling to their knees. One of the dragons, green and bronze, snapped at a line, severing it. The rope whipped away, sending a spray of snow and salt. Robb's heart beat a slow, heavy drum. The weight of the crown on his brow had never felt so literal. The bronze circlet pressed against his temples under the fur-trimmed hood. "She's there," the great John said beside him. "Somewhere under all that nonsense." Robb could see movement now on the ship's deck. Men in armor that glittered strangely. Women in flowing fabrics not meant for this cold. And at the rail, stepping forward into the pale northern light, a figure he knew even before he could see her face. She was smaller than he'd imagined. Slighter, the heavy cloak she wore made her seem almost fragile against the vastness of the sea and sky. But the hair, even braided and threaded with gold, caught the light like frost. And the dragons pivoted their heads to follow her as she moved, as if she were their son. A gangplank was lowered. Lord Wyman, swaddled in furs, his chins quivering, waddled forward to meet her with as much grace as he could muster. Robb could not hear their words over the distance and the murmur of the crowd, but he saw the deep bow the Lord of White Harbor gave, and the way she inclined her head in return. Not the sharp nod of a conqueror, but something measured. Then she turned her gaze toward the shore. Later, he would think he had felt it like a hand on his throat. That look. In truth, she could not have picked him out from so far. Yet it seemed to him that her eyes, pale, he would learn, a strange shade between blue and violet, traveled over the host waiting for her and paused where the wolf banners clustered. "She comes," the great John said, as the queen and her escort crossed the gangplank. "Best straighten your crown, boy." Robb laughed, though his mouth was dry. He swung down from gray wind, his boots crunching in the frost. The dire wolf padded after him, hair still bristling. Northmen parted before them, some making rough signs against evil, others gripping their weapons, others staring open-mouthed. At the foot of the quay, Lord Wyman and Daenerys Stormborn waited. She wore no crown. Her cloak was white as the snow around them, lined in some soft, gray fur he did not recognize. Beneath it, a dress of blue and silver shimmered like ice at dusk. Her hair was bound in 3 thick braids down her back, shot through with small golden rings. Her face was finer than he had expected. Cheekbones high, mouth full and firm, chin set in a line that spoke of stubbornness. Her eyes were wary. Beside her walked a man Robb guessed to be Jorah Mormont, though the Bear of Bear Island had once been a young, hot-tempered knight, and this man moved like one who had carried too many burdens for too many years. His beard was flecked with gray, his armor dulled by salt and sand. His eyes, though, were sharp and assessing. There were others. A lean, pale man in foreign robes, a dark-skinned woman whose bearing shouted warrior louder than any sigil, a boy with eyes like polished obsidian. And behind them, on the ship, the dragons watched with heads cocked. Lord Wyman's breath came in visible puffs as he turned toward Robb. "Your Grace," he began, voice thick. "May I present?" "I know who she is," Robb said quietly. He took 3 steps forward and went to one knee in the snow. A murmur rippled through the Northmen. He could feel their shock like the air before a lightning strike. Behind him, gray wind growled low, uncertain. Robb bowed his head, the crown cold against his skull. "Daenerys Stormborn," he said, his voice carrying in the sudden hush. "Queen from beyond the sea, breaker of chains. I am Robb Stark, king in the north and of the Trident. I kneel to no man. I kneel now to you not as a subject, but as an equal who would offer you his hand." He raised his eyes. She stood not 2 strides away now, close enough that he could see the faint lines at the corners of her mouth, the wind-pinked flush on her cheeks. Her eyes, pale and strange, met his without flinching. "You kneel quickly, for one who says he kneels to no man," she said. Her Westerosi was clear, her accent touched only faintly by the east. "I had a father," Robb said. "He knelt once long ago, cost him dear. Since then, we have bowed only to our own. I would not kneel at all if I thought it was weakness." He held her gaze. "I kneel now to show you that I am willing to meet you halfway, Daenerys Targaryen. Will you walk the other half?" Her mouth twitched, almost a smile, almost not. "Rise," she said. He stood. Gray wind came to stand by his side, towering, his yellow eyes on her. Many men would have flinched. She did not. She looked at the direwolf, taking his measure, then lifted a gloved hand and held it out, palm down. Gray wind sniffed it, hackle stiff. Robb held his breath. After a moment that seemed to stretch like pulled sinew, the direwolf's tongue rasped once over the fur of her glove. A ripple of relief and amazement went through the watching Northmen. "He's not fond of strangers," Robb said. "Neither am I," Daenerys said. "But we must learn to suffer them." She withdrew her hand and looked around at the banners, the men, the snow-dusted stone. "This is your harbor," she said, "your gate to the east." "It's Lord Wyman's," Robb said, inclining his head toward the old lord. "He holds it for the north, as he has held it for you these last days." "He did more than that, your grace," Lord Wyman wheezed. "He kept your ship from being dashed to splinters when a squall blew in 2 nights past. Though I dare say that great black beast of yours might have dried us all out again with a breath or 2. Daenerys glanced back at Drogon, a faint easing around her eyes. He is not a bellows, she said, though I suppose he would be insulted to hear me say it. Robb found himself smiling despite the knot in his chest. We should not stand in the cold. Speaking of bellows, Lord Wyman went on. The Merman's Court is open to you, your grace. Fires and food and more candles than any man could rightly need. If we stay out here much longer, we'll all be queen of the icicles before the day is through. There was a murmur of agreement. The dragons, as if in answer, shifted on the ship's rigging, wings rustling. One of them loosed a little spurt of smoke that curled up into the sky. Daenerys's gaze went back to Robb. Will your wolf let me walk at your side? She asked. Robb looked down at Grey Wind. The dire wolf looked back at him, then snorted and padded forward, as if to say, I will suffer it for now. He will, Robb said, so long as your dragons do not swoop down to snatch him. Dragons eat many things, Daenerys said. I have never heard of one that prefers wolf. Let us try to keep it that way, Robb said. They walked together up the wide steps toward the Merman's Court. The boy king of the north and the dragon queen from beyond the sea, the dire wolf and the men of the harbor. Behind them, the dragons screamed once more, as if marking this moment in their own fashion. The council in the Merman's Court lasted until the candles burned low and the air grew thick with smoke and breath and argument. Maps of Westeros and the narrow sea lay spread across tables carved with merman-bearing tridents. On one side stood Robb with his captains, Great John, Meej Mormont, Roose Bolton with his pale, unreadable eyes. Several river lords come north to swear once more. On the other stood Daenerys with her strange retinue, Jorah Mormont, jaw set, Ser Barristan Selmy, white-haired and straight as a spear, a young translator whose name Robb kept forgetting, though he spoke like water over stones. At first, they circled each other like wolves around a new scent. Daenerys asked of the Lannisters' strength and of Stannis on Dragonstone. Robb told her what he knew, which was more of what he had seen than of what anyone wrote in letters. The stubbornness of Riverland folk under siege, the clever cruelty of Tywin's moves, the capacity of men like Walder Frey to shift with the wind. She spoke of the East, of unsullied ranks that never broke, of Sellsword companies that would follow gold but also glory, of freedmen who would cross the world for the woman who had led them out of bondage. Her dragons were a presence even when she did not mention them. The Northmen flinched whenever a distant roar drifted in through the open windows. 3 dragons, Roose Bolton said at one point, his voice smooth as oiled glass. They say one was all Aegon needed to conquer the 7 kingdoms. Aegon had sisters with dragons of their own, Ser Barristan said. 3 heads of the dragon, 3 riders, 3 minds guiding them. And what of your minds? Meej Mormont asked bluntly. What do they want, besides a throne for your queen? Daenerys's eyes went to the map. I want a world where no one lives in chains, she said. Where boys do not grow up watching their fathers die for another man's feast or whim. I have seen too many cities built on backs of broken men. If I must destroy some to build better, I will. But I would rather break the yokes and leave the stones standing. Easy to say when the cities are not yours, the Great John muttered. You burned your own halls to keep the Iron Men from taking them, she shot back. He blinked, surprised into silence. Robb hid a flicker of admiration. She had listened on the road north, when they'd camped beside frozen streams and the Northmen had grumbled by the fires. She had watched and asked questions and remembered. She was not his father, nor his mother, nor anyone he had known, but she had some of their steel. And the North? He asked. What do you want of it? She looked at him, and for a heartbeat the room fell away. They were 2 young people across a table, both marked by war. I want it as an ally, she said, not a vassal, not a province ruled from afar by a distant queen who knows nothing of snow. The North has bled for southern kings and received little in return but graves. I offer something else. You offer freedom, Harrion Karstark said, bitterness in his voice. And in return you ask us to follow you into fire. She did not flinch. You are already in the fire, she said. Lions at your throats, krakens at your shores, traitors at your tables. I cannot promise your lands will not burn if you stand with me. I can only promise that if I win, no Lannister will ever rule you again. And if you lose? Roose Bolton asked softly. Then I will have died trying, she said. And you will have to find another way to live. There it was, Robb thought. The bare truth, stripped of banners. He leaned over the map. His finger traced the line from White Harbor south along the coast. Tywin holds the south and center, he said. We hold the north and most of the riverlands. The Vale stays behind its mountains. The Reach dances with the Lannisters when it suits them. The Stormlands, he shrugged. Stannis. We could sail for King's Landing, Yora said. Strike at the heart. Dragons over the walls, unsullied in the streets. Cut off the head and let the body flounder. And what of the lands in between? Robb asked. You burn the capital, and what then? Do the Lannister-ruled castles and gold mines bend knee out of fear? Or do they cling to their own, calling you a foreign storm come to drown them? Daenerys said nothing. Her hand rested on the table, small and steady. The North remembers, he said. It remembers Aegon's dragons too. Men here still tell tales of Harrenhal's stones melting under fire. They remember how the last Targaryen kings fell into madness. If you come as a conqueror only, they will fight you as they fought them. Would your people? She asked. Would you? He met her gaze. I sent to you because I saw a chance for something else, he said. We do not trust quickly in the North. We have long memories and hard hearts. But we know that when winter comes, a man alone in the snow dies faster than one with others at his back. You speak of winter, Ser Barristan said, and yet we sit here and plan a summer campaign. It is not just a word to us, Lady Meej said roughly. It is a long darkness with teeth. Daenerys's fingers tightened on the edge of the map. In the east, she said slowly, the Red Priests speak of a darkness too, a night without end, a cold so deep it burns, a tide of shadows. They say a hero will come with fire in his hand to drive it back. I thought their tales only that, tales. But on the road north, I saw men's breath freeze solid in their beards. I heard your old stories of things that walk in the snow with eyes like ice. She looked at Robb. If that is true, she said, if such a darkness comes, then perhaps it is not just my war we should be planning. A silence settled over the hall. Robb felt the weight of every gaze swing from her to him, and back. My brother serves on the wall, he said at last. He is no blood of mine by birth, but by life. If the threat is real, he will send word. Until then, we must deal with the enemies we see. Tywin's men, Cersei's boy king, Stannis perhaps, the Krakens. Daenerys nodded. Then let us speak of how we do that together, she said. They bent their heads over the maps. In the end, the council forged a plan that mixed ice and fire in equal measure. The North would march south again, through the neck and into the ravaged riverlands. Daenerys would sail her ships around to the mouth of the Blackwater, dragons harrying any Lannister fleet that dared to oppose her. They would strike not directly at King's Landing at first, but at the strongholds that fed it. The Rosby granaries, the Crownlands port towns, the supply trains crawling up from the Reach. When the city grows hungry, its people will grumble, Robb said. When they see dragons overhead and hear that the wolves stand with them, they will grumble louder. Not all will welcome you, but many hate the Lannisters more than they fear the unknown. And when they open the gates for us, the Great Jon asked, then we will see what kind of queen I am, Daenerys said. In a quiet moment, as the lords argued over which roads to take, Robb found himself standing beside her at the window, looking out over the harbor where her dragons wheeled. They frighten you, she said without preamble. He did not lie. Yes, he said, they awe me. They remind me that my father's stories were not only stories. He feared them too, she said. It was not a question. He respected what they meant, Robb said. Dragons or no, the last time your house came here, it changed the world. My father spoke often of what is lost when men think themselves small before something vast. They bow and they do not think to question. And yet you would bow to me? she said, her gaze on Drogon as he dived, sending gulls scattering. I would stand beside you, he said, but there are times when standing has to begin on one knee. She glanced at him, something like surprise in her eyes. My brother would have demanded you lie flat, she said. Kiss his boots. Wait for his whip. I am not your brother, he said gently. Her mouth tightened. I know, she said. The world is full of dead men who are not my brother. She watched Drogon climb again, his wings beating holes in the clouds. I freed Astapor because I could not bear what was done there, she said. I freed Yunkai for the same reason. Meereen was more complicated, but in all those places, I had no one to answer to but myself. In Westeros, I will have people like you, men with lands and oaths and old wounds. If I burn a city there, it will not only be the mast. RS who die. You already knew that, Robb said quietly, before you came. Yes, she said, but it is one thing to know it in a place you have never seen, another to feel the cold wind of it on your face. Jane's children played in the snow somewhere below, their laughter faint. He thought of his own brothers and sisters, scattered like seeds, of Sansa in King's Landing if she still lived, of Arya perhaps in the wilds, of Bran and Rickon. He still could not think their names without a pain like a knife, even now, even after Theon's remorse and the revelation of the Miller's boys. If you burn King's Landing, he said, you may kill my sister. If I do nothing, she said, Cersei will kill thousands more, perhaps including your sister. He closed his eyes for a moment. This is what it means to be a king, he said. Every road leads through someone's grave. And a queen, she said. They stood together in silence, watching the dragons. The march south was like no other Westeros had seen. Word spread ahead of them, racing through villages and towns. The king in the north was coming again, they said, with his dire wolves and his giant umbers and his hard-eyed river lords. But this time there was something else with him, something that came on the wind, on whispers, on the shimmering of heat over snow. First, it was only tales. Then came the first sighting. Farmers near the Dreadfort's southern border, staring up as shadows crossed the pale sky. Later, a patrol of Frey riders near the Trident, smashed from above in a rush of wind and fire that left their horses screaming and the bridge they tried to burn blackened but standing. They'll have a song for this, the great Jon said after that first clash, staring at the scorched earth. They already do, Harry Karstark said. He nodded toward a knot of camp followers where a boy was weaving a tune on a reed flute, the words stumbling but eager. Every night it changes. Dragons bigger, wolves sharper, the queen more beautiful. How could she be? The great Jon snorted, then glanced toward Daenerys' tent and coughed. Well, maybe a little. Robb watched the boy. Songs were wind, useful, dangerous, impossible to hold. Let them sing, he thought. Let every man between here and the capital hear of dragons and wolves marching together. Their army had grown. Men from the Riverlands, hearing that the Dragon Queen marched with the North, had joined them. Small lords and freeriders, angry men with burned farms, survivors of raids who had nothing left to lose. Some came for vengeance, some for hope, some for the chance to stand on the winning side when the dust settled. Daenerys' host mixed into them like oil and water, not quite blending but moving side by side. Unsullied ranks marched in perfect step, their spears glinting. Freedmen tramped in looser order, talking in a babble of tongues. Sellswords rode with watchful eyes, counting coin already in their heads. There were tensions. A northern boy bumped an Unsullied and woke to find a spear at his throat. A freedman laughed at a queen's name he could not pronounce and tasted the edge of a northern sword. Robb and Daenerys both spent nights moving among their men, soothing tempers, reminding them that the real enemies lay ahead. Sometimes, in the cold hours before dawn, Robb would wake to the sound of dragons crying in the dark. He would lie still, Grey Wind's warmth a solid weight at his side, and think of Winterfell's ruins and of King's Landing's towers. They will say we are mad, Caitlin had told him before he left White Harbor. Marching with dragons to fight lions. They will say many things, he had answered. If we win, they will call it destiny. If we lose, folly. And what will you call it? She had asked. I will call it what it is, he'd said. The choice I made, because there was no other that let me look my father's memory in the face. Near Harrenhal, they met the first true test of fire and ice together. Tywin had left a strong garrison under one of his nephews, bolstered by mountain clans and sellswords. The black stone castle sat like a burned hand in the center of the land, its towers still melted from Aegon's conquest. Men told tales of ghosts there, of screams that never faded. Robb cared nothing for ghosts. He cared that Harrenhal controlled the crossroads, that it watched the roads to King's Landing and the Trident both. We could pass it by, Roose Bolton suggested, his pale eyes on the map. Leave them to rot behind their walls. Go straight for the city. And let them harry our supply lines, the Great John snorted. Piss on them from their melted towers while we fight at the gates. No, we take it, Robb said. With your dragons, if you're willing. The hall on Heron's Hill had looked strange in the old drawings his nurse had shown him as a boy. Great tall towers reaching for the sky, proud and doomed. The reality was stranger. The melted stone glistened like cooled candle wax, its curves unnatural. Snow lay in the hollows. The air smelled faintly of something long burned. It remembers, Daenerys said, sitting her horse beside him. The last time my house came here. Does that trouble you? He asked. Her profile was hard. Everything troubles me, she said softly. That is the weight of this. But I am here to end a war, not to admire old scars. They arrayed their forces outside arrow range. Banners fluttered, wolves and dragons and tridents together. The sun hung pale and cold above the horizon. From the castle came the call of horns, the creak of portcullis and the scrape of weapons. Men moved along the walls, armor gleaming. A banner snapped in the wind. Lion of Lannister, still bright despite the weather. Robb rode forward, gray wind at his heels. Behind him, a little to the left, Daenerys did the same, her cloak bill lowing. Between them, the translator rode with raised voice, calling terms. Robb Stark, King in the north, and Daenerys Targaryen, rightful queen of Westeros, he shouted. They offer you mercy if you surrender now. Lay down your arms, open your gates, and you will be spared. Resist, and you will face their combined wrath. Arrows rattled down in answer, falling short. So much for mercy, the Great John muttered. Let us give them one more chance, Daenerys said. She nudged her horse forward. The world seemed to hold its breath. Men of Harrenhal, she cried, her voice clear. The wind carried it along the walls. You know what happened here once. You know your tales, how dragonfire melted these stones and turned your lords to ash. I have 3 dragons now that the world thought dead. I have an army of men who have broken their own chains. I have a king who has beaten the lions more than once. Standing with me, she lifted a hand. Above, the dragons wheeled. I do not want to burn you, she said. I do not want to repeat my ancestors' terror for the sake of it. But I will not leave the stronghold in the hands of those who serve the woman who murdered this man's father. She gestured to Robb. Open your gates, throw down your banners, or stand behind your walls and see if they protect you from fire. For a moment there was silence. Then, from the walls, a voice shouted, We have hostages, Riverland women and children. You burn us, you burn them too. The words cut through Robb like a knife. He had heard them before, in one form or another, every time some lord used the lives of innocents as shields. Daenerys's jaw clenched. I have heard that tune, she called back. In Astapor, they said the slaves would die if I broke their chains. In Yunkai, they said their wealth would vanish. In Meereen, they said their whole city would crumble. I freed them anyway. Some died. More lived. Open your gates. Last chance. A crossbow bolt thunked into the earth not 10 feet from her horse. Get back, Yora hissed. She did not move. Daenerys, Robb said low. Her eyes flashed. For a heartbeat, he thought she might ride forward alone. Then she pulled her horse back alongside him. "They have chosen," she said. He nodded. "Then so must we." They did not send the dragons in first. That had been one lesson their shared council had taught them. Let men see their power, but do not squander it. The Northmen and Unsullied formed ranks. Horns blew, drums thudded. They advanced under arrow fire, shields up, spears ready. Siege ladders went up, ram brought forward. Twice, men on the walls tried to drop burning pitch onto the ram. Twice, a dragon swooped, shrieking, a blast of heat turning fire to steam before it fell. The shock of that alone broke some of the defenders' courage. Robb saw men stumble back, faces white. Then the gates flew open, not from within but from without. A dragon struck, claws and weight and fire tearing the wood apart. The sound was like the world cracking. Drogon reared, black wings mantling, and loosed a torrent of flame into the gatehouse. Men screamed. Stone glowed dull red. Smoke billowed. The Unsullied surged through the gap, shields locked, spears thrusting. Northmen followed, gray wind bounding at their side. Robb rode with them, sword in hand, the clang and clash of battle all around him. Inside Harrenhal's courtyard, madness reigned. Men fought and fell, slipping in half-melted snow gone pink with blood. A group of defenders clustered around a knot of women and children, daggers held to thin throats. Robb saw them and felt his heart stutter. "Hold!" he cried. The Unsullied nearest him froze, as if time itself had stopped. One of the men by the hostages, broad-shouldered, lion on his breast, laughed. "You brought dragons," he shouted. "Now watch them roast your lambs." He dragged a girl forward, no more than 12, her hair tangled, her cheeks crusted with tears. He lifted his knife. Fire fell from the sky. For a breath, Robb thought Drogon had ignored their commands. Then he saw the flame curve, as if guided by some invisible hand. It washed over the men holding the hostages, enveloping them in a searing bubble. The screams were brief, cut off. When the fire cleared, the hostages lay on the cobbles, coughing, singed but alive. The men around them were blackened shapes. Daenerys landed in the courtyard astride Drogon's neck. Robb had known, in some distant part of his mind, that she rode them. Seeing it made something in him lurch. She sat with easy grace, her hand curled around a spike of bone, her cloak streaming behind her. Smoke coiled around her like a lover's arms. Her hair, unbound now, lifted in the updraft. She raised her hand. Drogon stilled. "Drop your weapons," she said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried. "This castle is ours." Some fought on. Some dropped their swords and fell to their knees. Some tried to flee and found the way barred by spears or flame. It was over quicker than any siege Robb had ever heard of. After, as they walked among the living and the dead, the weight of what they had done settled in. "These stones have known dragon fire before," Daenerys said quietly, looking up at the melted towers. "They survived. Those who lived here did not." "You spared more than you burned," Robb said. "You saved those hostages." "I did not do it alone," she said. "Drogon feels what I feel, sees what I see. He is not merely a beast. Or if he is, then I am too, for we are tied." "That is what frightens men," Roose Bolton murmured behind them. "Not just the fire, but the mind behind it." Robb shot him a look. The Bolton lord's pale eyes were unreadable. In the great hall, they sat under Harrenhal's blackened rafters, now draped with wolf and dragon banners, and made decisions that would plea outward. Tywin Lannister's nephew lay dead in the courtyard. The garrison that had not surrendered was mostly gone. They had prisoners to sort, lordless men to offer terms or execution, hostages to comfort. "Send word to the river lords," Robb said. "Tell them Harrenhal is no longer a lion's den. If they wish to treat, they may." "And to King's Landing?" Daenerys asked. "Yes," Robb said. Let them know that the last place in Westeros where Dragonfire split stone is now in your hands. Let them hear that it saved innocents and burned only those who held knives to children's throats. You still think like your father, the great Jon muttered, not unkindly, always trying to temper blood with justice. Robb did not answer. He thought of Eddard Stark, of his head on a spike, of Cersei's cold smile. Justice without power had not saved him. Perhaps justice with dragons would. From Harrenhal they moved swiftly. Tywin was not idle. Scouts brought word of his movements. A great host gathering near King's Landing, reinforced by Mace Tyrell's bright armored men. The lions still had teeth. The roses perhaps thorns. They will try to crush us between hammer and anvil, Roose Bolton said over the map. Their main host in front, raiding parties behind, cut our lines, trap us in the crownlands. Unless we strike first, Daenerys said. Her eyes gleamed. Unless we do what they do not expect. Which is? The great Jon asked. Sprout wings. She smiled thinly. Use the ones we have. They devised a bold plan, one that made Robb's stomach knot but sent a wild surge through his veins. Daenerys and her dragons would harry Tywin's columns on the march, never staying long enough to be overwhelmed by archers or scorpions. She knew from hard lessons in the East how vulnerable dragons were on the ground, how easily men could die around them. So she would make them ghosts and thunder, burning supply wagons, scattering horses, setting the countryside alight ahead of the Lannisters. Meanwhile, Robb would wheel his host through the King's Road's backways, using guides who knew every deer track and smuggler's path. He would avoid direct confrontation until Tywin's army was ragged and hungry, then fall on one flank while Daenerys struck the other. It means trusting that you can do more than frighten them, he told her on the night before they rode, the two of them sharing a skin of wine in the half-ruined solar that had once belonged to some Harrenhal lord. And you must trust that I will not grow drunk on my power and burn too much, she said, not without bitterness. It is easy to trust someone's strength, he said. The hard part is trusting how they use it. She looked at him for a long time. In Astapor, she said slowly, I used their own whips against them. In Yunkai, I bought and broke sellswords. In Meereen, her mouth tightened. In Meereen, I put up men on crosses who were guilty, and men who were not. I learned too late which was which. Westeros is not the East, he said. Our ghosts weigh differently, but they weigh. Will you judge me then? She asked. If I burn men you think should have lived? If I do not, he said, others will. The North, the Riverlands, your own past. You cannot escape judgment. Neither can I. She threw back her head and laughed, a low, wild sound. Your gods have made a cruel world, she said, full of men who must judge each other without ever seeing the whole of the storm. Perhaps, he said, but we have to live in it anyway. In the morning, the dragons rose into a pale sky, their wings beating storms. The war that followed was unlike any minstrel's song of old. There were still charges and countercharges, still shining lines of men and horses, still banners and blood. But there were also flashes of something none of them had seen. A column of Lannister men marching through a narrow wood, only to have the trees themselves catch fire above them as a dragon swept along the canopy. A siege train painstakingly hauled up a muddy slope, only to be smashed to splinters by a falling mass of scaled fury. Tywin adapted quickly. He sent his men to march at night, when dragons were less likely to fly. He scattered his supplies, set ambushes, built massive scorpions to send iron bolts skyward. Once, a shaft as thick as a man's leg tore along Rhaegal's flank, drawing a shriek that chilled even Robb's blood. Daenerys came back that night with soot on her cheeks, her hair wild, her eyes hollowed. He bled, she said, sitting by the fire as a healer smeared some pungent salve on the dragon's wound, the creature keening softly outside the tent. They bled him, slowly, carefully. She reached out and touched Robb's hand. I knew they would try, she said. On some level, I knew, but knowing and seeing are different. He squeezed her fingers. They were cold. His own hands were not much warmer. "They'll pay for it," the great John growled from his place nearby. "We'll feed them to him." "No," Daenerys said sharply. "We won't. That is not what he needs, or what I need." She looked at Robb. "This is the edge I must walk," she said, "between justice and vengeance, between the urge to burn and the need to build." "You do not walk it alone," he said. In the end, it was not Dragonfire alone that broke Tywin's host, nor Steel alone, but the two together. Near Duskendale, under a sky streaked with smoke, they met the bulk of the Lannister-Tyrell army in full. Men said the earth shook with the tramp of so many boots, the snort of so many horses. Shields glimmered like scales. Banners of lion and rose rippled, their bright colors defiant. Robb arrayed his men along a low ridge, the north on the left, riverlords on the right, unsullied in the center. Sel's words held the flanks like plugs in a barrel. Behind them all, out of arrow are Ange. Daenerys waited with her dragons, watching the enemy form. "This is it," the great Jon said, rolling his shoulders. "Fewer men than the field of fire, more tricks. Less grass, more snow," Haryon Karstark said. "The ghosts will have to make do." Tywin's battle lines advanced in disciplined blocks, archers and pikemen and cavalry all moving as one great machine. Scorpions rolled at their rear, iron bolts gleaming. "At your word," Daenerys said quietly, inexplicably standing beside Robb, a hand on Drogon's neck. "Not yet," he said. "Let them come closer." Arrows arced, shields thudded, men cried out. The first clash of spears and swords sent a roar through the air. Robb moved along the line, shouting, lifting men whose nerve wavered, sending reserves where the Unsullied began to buckle under sheer weight. The Lannisters pushed, a relentless tide, their gold and crimson darkening with mud and blood. "Now?" Daenerys called, her hair whipped in the wind, her eyes wild. "Now," he said. She sprang into the saddle. Drogon leapt skyward, his siblings with him. For a moment, they were black shapes against a white-gray sky, beautiful and terrible. Then they folded and dived. Fire fell in sheets. It did not sweep across the front indiscriminately. It struck in precise, horrifying bursts. A cluster of scorpions here, a wedge of heavy cavalry there, a knot of Tyrell spearmen. Each time at a place where Robb had seen the enemy's movements falter, where a blow from above would turn the tide. Daenerys had learned his way of reading battle as he had learned hers. He would gesture, sometimes barely, his sword making a small arc, and she would see, and the dragons would answer. Men died screaming. Others fell to their knees in the churned snow, dropping their weapons or fled, tearing off helmets as if to escape some imagined cage. In the midst of it all, Robb found himself face to face with a man in gilded armor, a lion snarling on his breastplate. "You?" the man spat, raising his sword. There was madness in his eyes, a red gleam. Robb did not know if it was some cousin of Joffrey's, a knight of the Rock, a simple man wearing livery bought with blood. It did not matter. Their blades met. Behind them, dragons screamed. The man's sword hacked like an axe, heavy and fast. Robb parried, the shock running up his arm. Gray wind darted in, tearing at the man's leg. The Lion Knight howled and swung a mailed fist at the wolf's head. Robb's blade slipped past his guard and found the seam in his neck. Blood sprayed, hot and startling in the cold air. When the horn sounded at last, the Lannisters' retreat, Robb was so exhausted he could barely lift his sword. His arm trembled, his ears rang. They did not pursue far. "Let them run," Daenerys said, landing beside him in a whirl of snow and ash. "Let them carry tales of dragons and wolves back to King's Landing. The fear will do more work for us than any spear." He looked up at her, at the soot streaking her face, the frost clinging to her hair. "You were right," he said. "We are not so different." "Oh," she asked, one corner of her mouth lifting. "You're as stubborn as any Stark," he said. She laughed, and the sound carried over the battlefield, strange and bright. King's Landing smelled of smoke and secrets. When at last they came to its walls, after smaller sieges and skirmishes, after surrendering castles and villages cheering or cursing as they passed, Robb thought of the first time he had seen the city, as a boy of 14 riding south with his father. It had seemed huge then, alien and hot. Now, after all he had seen, it seemed smaller, pinched, its red walls less impressive than Harrenhal's melted stone, its towers cramped compared to Meereen's pyramids. But the stench was the same. Shit and sweat and fear. They did not attack at once. Daenerys flew over the city on Drogon's back, low enough to make men duck and women scream, high enough to avoid the scorpions that sprang up on rooftops like ugly metal flowers. The other dragons shadowed her, flame held in check. She saw what Robb remembered. The ruined September of Baelor, the squat Red Keep, the crowded slums of Flea Bottom. She also saw things he had not. Patches of char where wildfire had burned during Stannis' failed assault. Repair work on the walls, new emplacements for those scorpions. She saw banners on the Red Keep, lion and stag, bright as ever, and one small, pale figure standing on a balcony, face upturned. "Joffrey," she said when she returned. "He looks like a boy playing at war. A cruel boy, perhaps, but still a boy. He's killed men like a man," Robb said, "and ordered others killed. Boys can do that as well as men." They sent in a parley flag. Tyrion Lannister came out to meet them. He rode a pony, armor tailored to his twisted frame, a green cloak brushed and gleaming. His face bore new scars, an ugly line from forehead to jaw where some blade or explosion had kissed him. His mismatched eyes took in the dragon, the wolf, the assembled host, and something like weary amusement flickered in them. "Well," he said, reining in, "I suppose it was only a matter of time before someone brought dragons to this mess. I always assumed it would be my sister." "Your sister had dragons," Daenerys said coldly. "She locked them in skulls and let them rot. I have living ones, and we all feel much safer for it," he said dryly. "Your graces." He inclined his head to both of them, a carefully measured bow. "I am Tyrion of House Lannister, Hand of the King, or perhaps X-Hand, depending on which way the wind is blowing at this very moment. How may I dissuade you from burning down my home?" "Your home," Robb said. "This city murdered my father." Tyrion's mouth twisted. "It tried to murder me as well more than once," he said. "King's Landing. Is equal opportunity that way?" Daenerys studied him. "You do not wear a lion's pride as others of your house do," she said. "I have always found pride a poor shield against other men's swords," he said. "Or dragonfire, I expect. You must be Daenerys Targaryen. You have my brother's eyes, I think, and some of his stubbornness, if half the tales that reach us are true." "You knew Rhaegar," she said abruptly. "Only as a distant figure on a field," he said. "I was a boy when he died. My father hated him. My brother admired him. My sister envied the songs about him." He looked past her at Drogon, who was watching the exchange with interest, a great black head cocked. "And you are Robb Stark," Tyrion said. "I met you once at Winterfell. You were younger with fewer lines. I had more hair and fewer scars. Time has not been kind to any of us." Robb remembered the dwarf then, the sharp-eyed man who had come north with the royal party and watched the Starks as if weighing them. He had seemed jaded even then, amused by everything and nothing. "You stood in my home and drank my father's ale," Robb said. "I would gladly do so again," Tyrion said, "if your father were there to share it. Sadly, he is not. Shall we speak of terms instead?" "You cannot speak for the queen," Daenerys said. "Your sister would not give you that power." "No," he agreed, "but I can tell you what will happen if you burn the city." "Tell us then," Robb said. Tyrion drew in a breath, his face serious now. "If you burn it all," he said, "wildfire will ignite. There is more of it beneath your feet than you know, in forgotten caches and new ones both. Cersei will not have wasted the preparations we made against Stannis. The city will become a green inferno. Your dragons may live. You perhaps, if the wind favors you. Most of the rest will not. And if we do not burn? Daenerys asked. You have more men than we do now, he said. More food, more hope, but we have walls and desperation, and a boy king who believes himself chosen by the gods. My sister will use every trick, every cruelty, to hold what she thinks is hers. She will put hostages on the walls. She will open the granaries to the poor one day and have them slaughtered the next for daring to take more than their share. She will burn this city from within if you do not do it from without. You describe her as a mad woman, Robb said. Why do you serve her? He smiled without humor. Because she is my sister, he said. Because my father's name is Lannister and I cannot scrub it from my skin. Because if I do not stand between her and the city, fewer people will survive, not more. He looked up at Daenerys. You want the throne, he said. You believe it is your right. You have dragons, armies, and possibly the gods on your side. You can take it, given time and enough deaths. The question is how many you are willing to buy it with, and what you will rule over when you sit it. I will not rule ashes, she said. I have said that before. Men say many things before the moment comes, he said. I am here to see what you will say now.
What do you propose?
Robb asked. Tyrion considered. Surrender is out of the question, he said. If I ride back with talk of kneeling, Cersei will have my head before I finish the sentence. But there may be an accident. An accident, Daenerys repeated. A breach in the wall, he said. A gate left open. A cache of wildfire that mysteriously misfires and destroys one of our own bastions instead of your ladders. Chaos within, matched by your pressure without. In such a chaos, certain people might die. A boy king, for instance. Perhaps a queen. Perhaps a grand lord or two. The people would be terrified, but if you move quickly to show them order afterward. You speak of treachery, Robb said, his stomach turning. I speak of minimizing harm, Tyrion said. If you attack honestly and Cersei fights honestly, which is to say, with all her cruelty, you will have a sack like no other. If you work with someone who knows where the city's cracks are, you may be able to end it more cleanly. Daenerys's eyes narrowed. Why would you betray your own blood? She asked. He looked at her, then at Robb, then back. Because I have seen what my blood does when unchecked, he said softly. Because the city you mean to rule deserves better than another mad Lannister or another distant Targaryen who sees it only as a symbol. Because I have no children of my own, and I would prefer not to leave behind only stories of horror. He spread his hands, the gesture oddly vulnerable. You may kill me now, he said, or refuse and attack anyway. Or we can work together, and perhaps carve a less terrible path through the inevitable. Robb's jaw clenched. This is not honorable, he said. No, Tyrion agreed. Honor is a luxury in short supply. You should know that by now. The question is whether this is just. Daenerys said nothing for a long moment. Then she nodded once. You will open a way, she said. We will hold our dragons back unless there is no other choice. When we are inside, we will move swiftly for the Red Keep. Joffrey and Cersei must be stopped. After that, she looked at Robb. After that, we will see what kind of justice we can build together. Done, Tyrion said. He smiled thinly. If I die in the attempt, consider it my last service to a realm that never wanted me. He turned his pony and rode back toward the city. Can you trust him? Robb asked. No, Daenerys said. But I can trust what he wants, which, for once, aligns with what we need. The night that followed was a long one. Fires burned in the city, torches moving like fireflies along the walls. Every now and then, a cry went up, a commotion quickly stilled. Near dawn, there was a sound like distant thunder. Section of the city's outer wall crumbled, a plume of dust rising. At the same time, smoke billowed from one of the towers, green-tinged, followed by screams. Tyrion had done his work. Now, Daenerys said, they went in under cover of chaos, not dragonfire. Unsullied poured through the breach, their discipline a stark contrast to the panicked defenders. Northmen followed, gray wind darting ahead to pull down men who ran with torches toward the poorer districts. Freedmen from Daenerys' host moved among the small folk, shouting in a dozen tongues that the queen had come, that those who dropped their weapons and stayed in their homes would be spared. There were atrocities. There always were in such confusion. Robb stopped 2 of his own men from dragging a woman into an alley with the flat of his sword. Daenerys ordered a sellsword hanged on the spot for the same. In other alleys and cellars, no one stopped worse. They reached the Red Keep not as conquerors in shining lines, but as a tide of grim-faced men. There, on the steps of the throne room, they found Joffrey. He wore black armor edged in gold, a crown askew on his blonde curls. His sword was out, its blade pretty and useless. His face was twisted in rage and disbelief. "You!" he shrieked when he saw Robb. "I'll have your head like your father's. I'll—" He broke off as shadows fell across the courtyard. Drogon landed on the tower above, claws digging into stone. He opened his jaws and let out a roar that shook dust from the eaves. Joffrey fell to his knees, hands over his ears. Cersei stood behind him. Her golden hair was unbound, her gown torn, her eyes wild. In her hand she held not a dagger but a small bottle, the glass green-tinted and familiar. Wildfire. "No!" Tyrion gasped behind them. He staggered forward, blood on his face. "Cersei, no!" She laughed, a high, cracked sound. "If I cannot keep it, no one will," she said. "This city is mine, my father's, my son's. I will not see it given to some silver-haired whore and a northern brat." She flung the bottle. Daenerys raised her hand. The world seemed to slow. The bottle tumbled end over end, green liquid sloshing, catching the first pale beam of dawn. A dragon moved. Drogon leapt, faster than Robb would have believed possible for something so large. He snatched the bottle from the air in his jaws. For a heartbeat, green flames licked around his teeth. Then he clamped down hard and swallowed. Fire burst from his nostrils and eyes, a strange, sickening light. He roared, a sound of pain. Daenerys cried out. For a moment, Robb thought the dragon would explode, scattering molten flesh over them all. Instead, with a convulsion that shook the stones, Drogon threw back his head and belched a column of mixed fire, green and red and gold, twisting together before dissipating into smoke. The wildfire was spent. Cersei's face crumpled. Joffrey wailed. Daenerys slid from Drogon's back to the steps, barely catching herself. "Take them," she said through gritted teeth. Unsullied moved in. Joffrey struggled, biting and clawing like the child he was. Cersei tried to reach inside her gown, perhaps for another vial or a blade. An unsullied spear took her through the shoulder. She collapsed with a scream. Robb watched, chest heaving, heart pounding. "It's done," Tyrion whispered beside him. He looked older than he had that morning, more exhausted. "Seven save us all, it's done." Robb looked at Daenerys. Her face was pale, sweat sheening her brow despite the cold. She climbed the steps to the throne room slowly, as if each step cost her. Inside, the Iron Throne awaited, a jagged game of swords and shadows, taller than he remembered. She stood at its foot, looking up. In that moment, Robb saw the girl who had walked into fire and lived. He saw the queen who had freed cities and burned men. He saw the woman who had ridden with him through snow and blood, who had held his hand by the fire while dragons cried in the night. "Will you sit?" he asked softly. She looked back at him. "Not alone," she said. There were gasps and murmurs all around. Tyrion's eyebrows shot up. Yora stiffened. "What do you mean?" Robb asked. "I mean that I will not be a queen above all and answerable to none," she said. "I have seen what that does. I will sit, yes, but I will build a council around me. People who will tell me when I am wrong. People who do not fear me so much that they lie." She laid a hand on the arm of the throne, but did not climb. "You spoke of the North's freedom," she said to him. "I have not forgotten. I cannot decide that alone. If I free the north, what of the Iron Islands? What of Dorne, the Vale, the Reach? All have grievances, all have histories. I can no more tear Westeros apart in a moment than I can make a dragon be born at my whim. His heart sank and steadied. He had known, in truth, that it would not be simple. You would keep the north bound, he said. After all this, I would call a council of the realm, she said. Lords and ladies and men of none of those ranks. I would ask them what Westeros will be. If they agree to let the north go, I will bless it. If they do not, we will see. That is not enough, Haryon Karstark snapped from behind him. It is more than any king has ever offered you, Tyrion said dryly. Believe me, I would know. Robb's jaw clenched. He thought of his men, of the vows they had sworn, of the dead piled on fields and in ditches, of banners burned, of his father's words in the Godswood. There will still be fights, he said. Blood, perhaps another war later. There may, Daenerys said. But if we make this peace now, if we do not tear the realm apart further in the name of pride, there may be enough left to face whatever comes from the north in truth. The darkness your stories speak of, the one the Red Priests whisper about. I would have dragons not only to burn cities, Robb Stark, but to fight that darkness if it comes. I would have wolves at their side. Can we not do that better if we are not spending ourselves on each other? He closed his eyes. When he opened them, her pale gaze was still there, steady. I made you a promise, he said. I would stand with you if you freed my people. You have freed them from Lannister rule. You have not yet freed their future, but you have given them something no one else has, a chance. He drew a breath. I will hold my crown until your council meets, he said. Until then, I will send my lords back north to rebuild, to prepare for winter. I will stay here if you will have me and help keep order. And when the council meets? She asked. Then we will see, he said. If they vote to free the north, I will go home as a king. If they do not, I will go home as a lord. Or die trying to become one. A faint smile touched her lips. Always stubborn, she said. Always, he agreed. She looked at the throne. Very well, she said, slowly, with the eyes of the world upon her. Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen climbed the steps and sat upon the Iron Throne. It was not comfortable. The swords dug into her back, her thighs. It was higher than she liked, making the men below seem smaller. She did not smile. Daenerys of the House Targaryen, Tyrion said quietly, his voice carrying. First of her name, Queen of the Undulls and the Rhoynar and the First Men. Lady of the Seven Kingdoms, if we keep them, or fewer if we do not. Khaleesi of the Great Grass Sea, Breaker of Chains, Mother of Dragons. Those are too many names, she said dryly. Queens tend to collect them, he said, and shed them just as quickly. She looked out over the hall. Robb Stark, she said, come stand before me. He did. Gray wind padded at his side. You have fought beside me, she said. You have bled for your people and for mine. You have seen your enemy's blood on your hands and not turned away. Will you swear to help me hold this realm together long enough to shape something better from it? He looked at the throne, at her, at the banners hanging limp in the smoky air. I will, he said, so long as my people are not forgotten in your shaping. They will not be, she said. Kneel then, not to a queen alone, but to the hope that we can make something less terrible than what came before. He went to one knee. When he rose again, he was still a king in his own heart. How history would name him remained to be seen. Outside, the dragons circled the broken city like storm clouds. Beyond them, beyond the smoke and ruin and cries of victory and grief, the wall stood in its frozen silence. In the haunted northern forests, pale eyes watched with patient malice. Winter was still coming, but for this moment, in this hall of swords and shadows, ice and fire stood not opposite, but side by side, and something new, fragile and fierce, was born.